So thank you for joining me today. Our office, the Sarasota County Extension Office, has put out this starter guide. And the webinar we're going over today is about planting. So this is going to be a plant guide for newcomers to Southwest Florida. My name is Ashley Ellis. So I'm the Sarasota County Residential Horticulture Agent and the Master Gardener Coordinator here. Some of my program goals are promotion of sustainable landscaping through the preservation of existing and natural resources and creation of wildlife habitat. And we're going to learn a little bit more about our Master Gardener volunteers a little bit later on in the presentation. But one of the biggest roles that they have is our plant clinic. And so up on the screen there is an email address for our plant clinic and a phone number. And Master Gardeners help to diagnose plant issues and help with plant selection. So they're a tremendous resource in our office. And this is a note about all of our programming. Um, we have an option here for accommodations. So if you maybe have a hearing challenge or mobility issue, if you were able to let our office know in advance of a specific event or program, we will do our best to accommodate you. And for those of you that may be new to Extension, just a little explanation of what it is here. But it's a partnership between Sarasota County, the University of Florida, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So essentially, as educators here at our Extension office, we use university research and resources to address our local needs through our classes, through outreach events, and different volunteer opportunities. And so we're taking that maybe kind of more heavy research that is being put out by the University of Florida and trying to connect that with the residents in our community. And I think a great example of a way that we've done that in our office over the past year, a number of our staff, so this would be our water resources agent, our natural resources educator, our Florida friendly educator, myself. We have a school and community gardens educator and a waste reduction agent. We also have a Sea Grant agent in our office. We all work together to build this online program that's called Neighborhood Best Practices. And if you're new or you've been living in Sarasota County for many years, I still think this would be a very valuable program, especially if you live in a planned community, like a gated subdivision. My former role, I worked in Sarasota County for the Environmental Protection Division, reviewing development applications and working with homeowners and contractors to do various permitting projects like putting in new homes or docks, things like that, and applying our environmental regulations to those different development options. And in that, we got a lot of questions. We get a lot of the same questions over and over, especially in our planned neighborhoods. So, for example, maybe you have stormwater ponds in your neighborhood and you're having algal bloom issues, but yet potentially it could be dealing with inappropriate application of fertilizers near water bodies. So this program basically aims to look at the frequently asked questions and misconceptions that we see in these areas to ultimately promote a more sustainable community and landscape. So it's completely free. There's 9 different modules kind of covering all our different program areas. And you can register for it or enroll for it using this link here, which I can provide to all of you at the end of the webinar. But yeah, it's geared towards HOA board members, community managers, planned community residents. And so I think it would be a very valuable resource for connecting you with the programs that we are all involved with here and the common issues that we see in these neighborhoods. Some other things that we do at Extension, you probably found us, I'm assuming, through our Eventbrite. So the Sarasota County Extension Eventbrite is where you're going to find the most comprehensive list of all of our programs, events that are coming up. So I'm just highlighting a few here that are specific to the residential horticulture program and our Florida Friendly program. So this Saturday, and we'll talk about water conservation in this presentation, we partner with Sarasota County stormwater, and we offer 4 or 5 times a year these rain barrel workshops. So if you thought about adding a rain barrel to your landscape to help with water conservation, this is a great way to learn about how to do that and actually obtain a rain barrel. So you can go to the Eventbrite. We have the next class is this Saturday. It's going to be at our extension office at Twin Lakes Park, which is located at 6700 Clark Road in Sarasota, or exit 205, just a little east of 75 at the Twin Lakes facility. And you can either attend for free, and in that case, you would not walk away with a rain barrel, but you'd still be able to learn about using a rain barrel and how to install it. Or you can buy a ticket using the Eventbrite, and you would then walk away with a rain barrel that day. Our Master Gardener volunteers, they also offer demonstration garden tours. It's a great way to learn about Florida-friendly landscaping and learn about the different types of plants that are grow in our area. And the next one is going to be March 18th at 10 a.m., again at our Twin Lakes Park location. And then another interesting class that folks that are in this webinar might also find helpful is fertilizing effectively in Suncoast soils. And that's going to be in person at the Shannon Staub Library in Northport on April 3rd at 4 o'clock. And then lastly, April 26th is National Arbor Day. In our office, we do an Arbor Month. So last year was the pilot project. And what we did was 4 or 5 different workshops across the county where you learn about trees for the Suncoast, and you walk away with a tree, a native tree that's been carefully selected for its wind resistance, pest resistance, and for size. You know, when we're talking about a lot of the property sizes in our area are quite constrained. In Sarasota County, the average lot size is between like 8 and 10,000 square feet. So it doesn't leave a ton of space for trees that are going to get quite large. So we've tried to um, do a selection of trees that are appropriate for most of the people that live in our area. So do take a look at our Eventbrite for upcoming classes. This is just a few of the many that are available, and these are just highlighting mostly the horticulture-based classes, but there's many other classes out there you might find interesting as well. So for today's webinar, our flow here, we're going to be looking at first what's called a hardiness or growing zone. We're going to talk about our soils. We're going to briefly talk about water management strategies. And then we're going to do a little, can I plant this? So we're going to look at a few different species and kind of discuss the attributes of those. And then lastly, we'll go over some resources available to you in your journey here in landscaping in Florida. So what you're looking at here is the USDA Plant Hardiness Zone map. So it's a standard which gardeners and growers can determine which perennial plants are most likely to thrive at a location. So you'll notice there's different colors on this map, and you can also access this yourself at the link source here in the bottom right-hand corner. And this is an interactive map. So it's kind of cool. You can type in your zip code and see exactly wherever over the country you might be interested in learning more what growing zone you're in. And if you're already familiar with this concept of the growing zones, you may have known that these have all shifted. So this map was updated last fall, and we now are all kind of shifted south a little bit. All of our growing zones have, with the climate change, we're seeing warmer temperatures, which changes this map. So Florida, you can see, is quite a large state, and we have 7 different growing zones in the state of Florida. And the importance for knowing your growing zone is, for someone like myself, I've been down in Florida now for about 13 years, but I came from Maine originally. So I was in central Maine here in like growing zone 4. And you can see it's quite the difference in temperature and climate, of course, here in Florida. One of the reasons that I chose to move here. So what we can grow in these other areas may not be also what we can grow where we live now in Florida if you're new to the area. So a lot of times when you're at nurseries, you're going to see that there's a label, a plant label, or if you're buying seeds, possibly, maybe you're doing like a vegetable garden. It's really important to look at that seed label or plant label to see, is this plant located within our growing zone? That's step number one, trying to figure out, is this even something that can survive in this region? And so this is a closer look at Sarasota County. A little difficult to kind of make out these boundaries, but if you can see my cursor, this is the boundary of Sarasota County. And you can see there's three different colors in in our limits here. So you have 9B, which is kind of the eastern part of the county here. And then you have 10A, which is like the central part of the county. It's the majority of Sarasota County. And then there's these little fringes south of us and on some of the barrier islands, kind of starting Venice south, that's in this darker orange color. And that is 10B. So the types of plants that are going to be capable of growing out here may even differ slightly than what could be growing out east here. Um, so some of the considerations when you're planting in these coastal areas are, what are the plant's ability to deal with aerosolized salt? Um, that is something that we is important when you're looking at the qualities of a plant and you're near a waterway, to make sure that it can tolerate aerosolized salt spray. Um, you also want to make sure if you're planting near a waterway, um, are you having erosion issues? So looking at the plant's ability to help with erosion, and we can help you with that. We only have a half hour together today, but we can certainly help kind of do selection for you specific to your area. Another key factor anywhere that we're going to be planting in Sarasota County is, especially when it comes to trees, is wind. If you've been here in the past few years, you've probably experienced some of our storm events, which are some high wind events. So it's really important to make sure that the trees that we're selecting have some high wind resistance. And I thought this was an interesting fact here that trees planted within 8 miles of saltwater coastlines should possess some degree of tolerance to aerosol salt spray. That's 8 miles. So that really takes us out pretty far. I live in the Venice Gardens area, so I'm within 8 miles of a saltwater shoreline. In fact, if you kind of do a bird's eye, um, as the bird flies, you could even get towards close to 75 in some areas. So it is something that's important to consider, and enough so that we are actually going to be installing a new coastal garden at our demonstration gardens at Twin Lakes, because we have a lot of folks that live out on the islands and they're in these different communities and their landscape is struggling. And so they're wondering what could be the cause of it. And a lot of times it's just starting out with the wrong plant. Um, if you've heard of Florida Friendly Landscaping, which is a big program in the state of Florida, in our office, it's the first principle is right plant, right place. So if we're selecting plants in these areas that aren't adapted to high drought conditions, wind conditions, the aerosolized salt, um, potentially saltwater intrusion and well issues, um, you're going to be setting yourself up for failure. So we can help you with that, at our extension office, is coming up with the correct plant palettes. So in addition to the growing zones, it's also important to understand how our soils are made up here in Southwest Florida. So on the left-hand side of this slide, you're seeing a soil profile. So you can see the little sprigs of grass here up at the top, and then you can see these different horizons in the soil profile. And our state soil is called the Myakka fine sand. And it gets that name because of all this bright white color. It's mostly sand. So if you've ever dug a hole here, you've probably experienced this. And As opposed to on the right-hand side of the slide, here's the soil profile of like a generic northern forest soil. So you can see that this is a darker horizon up here at the top because it has leaf litter that has broken down over time and turned into more of this organic soil. So this is a much richer soil. This is a lot of reason why we struggle with, um, why folks struggle with plant survival here is, again, if you're choosing plants that are not drought tolerant or have roots that are adapted to living in soil that's largely comprised of sand, or you're not amending your soil in some way to add this organic matter, plants are going to struggle in that environment if they're not native to our area. So when you have a low organic content, you're also going to have lower nutrients. You're also going to have a higher filtration rate or leaching rate. And what I mean by that is, um, when we have our heavy rain events, that soil, the sandy soil can't hold on to that water. So it's moving through the soil very quickly. Some ways that you can help with retaining that water is having ground covers and having using things like mulch products that will help to hold that water and also help to control. Mulch can also control weeds. Um, it can also add organic material to the soil as it decomposes, and it also helps with thermal regulation in both scenarios of low temperatures or high temperatures. So mulch is another big um, principle in Florida-friendly landscaping when it comes to um, building our soil and retaining water in our landscapes. Our soils are also known for having high soil pH, which when we're talking about like acidity or alkalinity, we tend to be more on the alkaline side. And so soil pH also can influence what nutrients can be taken up by your plants and what type of plants are going to thrive in those environments. So another thing that we can help you with at our extension office is doing soil tests and water tests. So we can test for pH and we can test for salinity at our Twin Lakes extension office. And that will help in determining, the right plant for the right place for you as well. For example, gardenias, ixoras, even like blueberries, right? They all require they prefer a higher pH, lower pH, a more acidic type of pH. So if you do a soil test and you find that yours is more alkaline, you're going to struggle, those plants are going to struggle to survive there. So you're better off, again, trying to choose plants that are going to be more suited to those areas. And it's really important to practice water conservation in Florida. That is the big reason why we have the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program is so that we can protect the Florida aquifer, protect our drinking water, and that we're being um, good stewards of the environment and using our water wisely, and especially not overusing it on our landscapes. So some water management strategies, number one is start with choosing drought tolerant plants. Um, and we have a fantastic resource for the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program, which you can look through on their website. We can share those links out after this webinar of how to look up whether a plant is Florida friendly or not. You can type in your zip code and get a whole list of plants that are readily available that are either drought tolerant, pest resistant, and some of those are native plants as well. Timing. So if you have an irrigation system or you're even hand watering, the best time of day to water is in the early morning hours. You don't want to water in the middle of the day, right? That's going to evaporate quite quickly or potentially even burn plants if you're watering on top of the foliage. That can be magnified and then actually burn your plants. And it's not great to water at night because that water can actually lead to like fungal issues over time. In our cooler months, would water less frequently. So it's important to look if you have an irrigation system, to look at the timer, make sure that it's operating correctly, and adjust as appropriate based on the time of year. It's important to remember that the root zone of plants, for the most part, are going to be in the top 12 inches of the earth. So the recommendation is not necessarily to do light, frequent watering because that's inefficient and it's going to encourage those plants to have shallow root systems. We want to develop fibrous, deep root systems. And so you're going to have a better chance of doing that with less frequent, deeper watering. And University of Florida has a number of publications out there, especially if you have turf, what type of watering schedule you would need based on your turf, whether it's St. Augustine or Bahia or Zoysia. And so we can connect you with those resources as well. And of course, excessive irrigation can lead to root rot. In our plant clinic, it's not uncommon for us to receive turf samples. People are wondering what's wrong with their turf, and a lot of times it's because they're overwatering or they're watering at night. And so the roots are actually rotting. And like I said before, mulch is magic, as our Florida friendly educator Forrest Hecker likes to say. And I totally believe in that. Mulch is great for water conservation, thermal regulation, weed control, and aesthetics. And pictured here, you can see this was down at the Naples Botanical Garden. I was down there, or not Naples Botanical Garden, this was at the Edison Ford Winter Estates. I was down at a plant sale there, and they had a beautiful rain barrel hooked up at one of their buildings, and they had painted it this with this beautiful botanical print. So I made sure to add that in the presentation because I think that looks so nice. And then we've got an image here showing a sprayer head that is poorly placed, right? It's right in the corner of this lawn area and a walkway. Not only is it not safe for people to be walking over wet bricks like this, but it's really poor water management. We don't need to be watering hard surfaces. So if you have questions about your irrigation system, our office does offer free irrigation evaluation. So you could also reach out if you are having problems with maybe the timer, you have some broken heads, or maybe you're afraid you have some leaks. We can help with that too. All right, the next few slides we're going to go through are mostly going to be plants that I have seen in landscapes that really shouldn't be there. So I'm sure some of these are going to look familiar to you, but I'll explain a little bit why they shouldn't be there as we go through these. So the next few slides are going to highlight plants that are considered invasive. So this is a really another important thing to consider when we're adding plants to our landscapes here in Southwest Florida or anywhere in Florida. Unfortunately, we're known as an invasive species hotspot, and that's not just limited to plants. There's a lot of invasive reptiles here as well and other animals. But the horticulture industry over time has contributed a lot to the issue with invasive plants. So these are species that are exotic, not native to our area, that cause some kind of ecological harm. They take over natural areas. They're very difficult to control. In Sarasota County, we actually have most of these plants are prohibited. So you can't install them outdoors so that they don't then escape into natural areas. And one that I see still sold in nurseries and installed in even new landscapes is this Mexican petunia. It's a category 1 invasive plant. So this invasive plant group in the state of Florida has a list that's updated. It was just updated this past year, and they're categorized the different species into either category 1 or 2 based on its aggressiveness or whether it's been documented to impact natural areas. So a category 1 is more problematic than a category 2, but both are species we don't want in our landscapes. So this is one that if you have in your landscape and you're looking to have removed, that's another thing we can help you with. We can provide you the best management practices for removal, whether it's going to be hand pulling or whether it requires something more aggressive, like some kind of chemical herbicide. We can provide you with information from University of Florida of how best to control these plants. Here is another invasive plant. This is considered a category 2, but it's nettle leaf porterweed. And you'll notice that I have the botanical name along with each of these plants. The botanical name or Latin name or scientific name is really important when it comes to plant selection, right? We use a lot of different common names in the plant world, and one person could call this one name and another person could call it another, but the scientific name or the botanical name is consistent and it's international. So it's important when you're going to plant nurseries to make sure if they can't tell you what cultivar or what the botanical name is of the plant they're selling, if you're questioning whether it could be an invasive plant, you probably should not purchase it. So this is one that we see a lot in our landscapes. It produces tons of seeds, and so it very easily escapes into and becomes very hard to control. So this is another one that we're seeing a lot in our landscapes. Lantana, this specific species, Drago is another one that is frequently sold at nurseries. And there's some other alternatives to all of these plants, whether they're native or just not invasive and Florida friendly that serve a similar role in landscapes or have a similar look. We have a native lantana, and so we can certainly help with, again, with management and management strategies and with substitutes for these plants. Golden pothos, here's another vine that we see regularly growing up the trunks of our trees and kind of shading out our canopies. This is a category 2 invasive plant, so it's very common in homes as a house plant, and that's where a lot of these invasive plants have become out of control is because when we live in an environment where these plants can thrive. And so maybe you've got a plant that's outgrown a pot in the house and you decide to put it outside. So you can see like the havoc that this can wreak on landscapes in a very short period of time, mind you. And these can lead to hazardous conditions as well. When you have this growing up a tree and taking over its branches, um, it's going to maybe make that tree more less stable in a high wind environment. If it's shading it out and competing with its ability to feed itself, it's almost like smothering and smother the tree. So you definitely want to avoid putting these plants out into the landscape. And another one that I see regularly still installed in landscapes is called oyster plant. It's got kind of this purpley underside and green on the top. And it's just another quality of invasive plants is they do really well with very little. So they can outcompete our native plants and cause harm to natural areas. So I think this is likely why it's such a popular plant is because it survives on very little. And so it's still used a lot in landscapes. And then here's some just some suggestions. So those were just a few plants that we don't want to have in our landscapes. We want to avoid introducing them. And so some other options for those as alternatives are native plants. So natives or plants are those that naturally occur here and they're adapted to our soil conditions, our water conditions, the pests in the area. So they're quite resilient plants that require very little input. And these are just some pictures of various native plants that I had visited one of our local native nurseries here, and they had just we're very fortunate in Sarasota County that we have several native plant nurseries that have great selections of plants. And Florida-friendly landscaping as well is another great option for people. They're not going to, the guide will not have plants that are invasive in Florida-friendly landscaping, and they've been carefully selected so that they're commercially available plants in our area and that they don't require a lot of water, they're pest resistant, and some other good choices. And this plant guide, we'll don't want to click on this right now because it may stop the presentation, but I'll share the link to this website, but it's available online and it's a database that you can search again by your zip code, and or maybe you can use some filters like saying you want to have a plant that can do full sun or full shade, or you want a shrub, or you want this type of color. You can make those selections and then it will come back with a list of plants based on your criteria. So it's a really great resource. Also an app you can download on your phone for free. So if you're at a nursery, this is how I use it, and I've seen a plant for sale that I really like, but I'm not sure. I've never heard of it before, and I want to make sure, is it Florida friendly, or what kind of conditions does this plant require? I'll use that guide. And then lastly here, the Florida Association of Native Nurseries. You can go onto their website and look up native nurseries near you. And the people that typically own and operate those businesses are very knowledgeable on what grows in our areas and can help you as well with making the good choice for your landscape. And then here's just some examples. We talked about Florida-friendly landscaping and that number one principle of right plant, right place. Here's something that we see a lot of in our area too, is wrong plant, wrong place. So these are just some highlights that's important to consider that I see over and over again. Um, you can see in this picture here, we have a rubber tree that was probably quite small. I wouldn't be surprised if it was in a container that maybe even someone brought from up north, because you could buy these at, the big box stores up north too and have it as a house plant. And they decided to, give their plant freedom here and put it outside. And over time, and not that long of time, this is something I've seen in growing in my neighborhood actually. It's taken over the utility box, its root system, it's growing into the power line. This is totally wrong plant, wrong place. It's going to cause, this one little act of putting this plant here is going to cost these people a lot of money in maintaining it, and hopefully not, you know, result in losing their power in the heat of the summer. So again, right plant, right place. Think about overhead utilities before you plant something, making sure you're not going to plant something right under a power line that's going to grow into it or require constant maintenance to keep it from getting too tall. And then here's a picture of a palm that I see as well happening a lot in our area is right, wrong plant again, wrong place. We've not thought about how tall this palm is going to get and how wide and its crown is going to get. And now it's planted too close to the eave of this house and it's growing into it. So it's really important to think about size and maturity before you put something in the ground. And here's another great example of that. You've probably seen these huge trees kind of all around Sarasota County, and they're some of them are Norfolk Island pines, some of them are Cook Island pines. They're not considered invasive, but man, they get really tall and they can serve as lightning rods, right? So they can be the tallest thing in a landscape, and you don't want this very close to your home that it's going to be a lightning rod. So this picture is showing a tabletop Christmas tree. So when you go shopping around Christmas time at the grocery store, you probably see these little trees for sale. This guy, if you decide you can't see it, you don't want to throw it out at the end of the growing Christmas season. You put it in your landscape, and then it turns into this guy, and not that doesn't take that long. So um, important important things to consider when we put things outdoors, what size they can get. And we get a lot of questions about palms in our plant clinic. So given some examples here of things that we see on a regular basis. So on the left-hand side, we're looking at a foxtail palm. It's got fronds that are starting to yellow. And the reason I have this up here is that many of the palms that we have in our landscapes are not native to this area. So they are not adapted to our soils, and they often have nutritional issues. And so it's really important to understand how to fertilize palms, how to appropriately feed them. Um, most fertilizers are NPK. You've probably heard of that. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. There's some micronutrients and macronutrients that palms also need, like boron and magnesium, to keep them healthy. And so we can help you with that. If you think you have a nutritional issue with a palm, we can help make suggestions on that. It's also important that you understand like what nutritional issues are happening so that you're not over applying fertilizer. And then understanding too that it takes a long time for palms to show improvement. So if you've got a palm like a foxtail that is prone to these issues, um, and you've applied fertilizer and you go out in a couple of weeks and it hasn't greatly improved, you know, you can actually cause toxicity to the plant if you keep applying that fertilizer in the wrong kind or in the wrong rate. So it could kill the palm by over fertilizing. That it could take 6 months for a palm to show recovery after being fertilized. So just keep that in mind. And then these next two pictures are of those pruning conditions that we see that are a big problem in our area. So you can see this Canary Island date palm. This is a common pruning practice. People, I guess, want to make it look like a pineapple. And it's doing this type of pruning can introduce disease to the palm. It can weaken the palm. We have some various palm diseases in our area and pathogens that can be transmitted from one palm to the next when you're doing these cuts. And if you think about the commercial landscapers out there going from one house to the next and doing these types of pruning, it's a place where a lot of disease can spread. And here's the pictures of what we call hurricane cutting. So in this picture above, we've got a series of cabbage palms, which are our native palm. So they're quite a resilient palm that doesn't normally need a lot of help with nutrients and things like that because they're adapted to our area. And one of the best trees or palms that could be used in a place that's prone to hurricanes. But this is a really bad practice that we see on a regular basis, and it's called hurricane cutting. It's basically where they come in and remove all of the fronds and just leave a couple here. With it, and I think I've heard people claim that they say it's good for hurricane season, preparing for hurricane season. In fact, it's setting you up for failure because you're removing green fronds that help to feed the palm. They help to protect their crown shaft, which is their single growing point on the palm. If you have a nice big healthy crown like these cabbage palms down here, those are going to help to protect that growth spear. So when you have a high wind and these are getting all whipped about, you have these fronds that are going to help protect that. And it also is what helps feed the palm. So if you're removing all these green fronds, you're weakening the palm and its ability to feed itself, which then could allow for pests and disease to kind of move in. So yes, don't do those pruning practices. And then lastly, we have some resources here. A certified arborist. We get a lot of questions about trees in our office. And sometimes people want to know, should I remove a tree? Can I prune the tree? How should I prune the tree? This tree is really close to my house. I'm very concerned it's going to come down in a hurricane. Like, what should I do with it? Our recommendation is to always contact a certified arborist. And so you can find them by going to treesaregood.org. and you can put in your zip code, and it will give you a whole list of people that are certified arborists. And these are people that have do continuing education. They have some kind of many years of experience in arboriculture, or they have a degree in forestry or tree care of some kind. And they're doing these continuing education to like hone their skills. And so they're most of arborists that I have met, they're in the business of keeping trees. They want to do structural pruning to potentially, if a tree is in needed some pruning, they'll do it in a way that is healthy for the tree. They're they're not in the business of wanting to remove trees. So I think they will give you a fair assessment. They often will come out to your property and take a look at it, and they can do things like a risk assessment where they look to see is there decay in the trunk? Is this tree within a certain distance of this house that it could cause a major catastrophic failure in the event of a storm? So they're a great resource when it comes to questions for trees. Or let's say you've got a large oak tree in your yard and the roots are starting to lift the driveway or a sidewalk. An arborist could help with doing some like selective root pruning if you want to keep that tree so that it can reduce that issue. And then we mentioned our Master Gardener volunteers. They go through an extensive training through our office. I'm in the middle of teaching that right now. About a 14-week program. They get about 75 hours of education on various horticulture practices, and then they help to support our office and our different agents through various activities. And one is that plant clinic. And if you visit our website, you can get a full location of all of our plant clinics. We're mostly at libraries throughout Sarasota County, although when we're in season, October through April, we do have a plant clinic at the Philippi Farmhouse Market, and that's on the second Wednesday of the month from 8 to 1. So it's a great place to meet with a master gardener and ask your burning plant questions there. And then, as I said, we've got Master Gardener demonstration garden tours. So, right, we have two demonstration gardens at Extension. One is at our Twin Lakes location at 6700 Clark Road. And those garden tours are the third Monday of every month, starting at 10 a.m. And then our second demonstration garden is down in Venice, and it's right across the entrance to the Shamrock Park and Nature Center. That's at 3900 Shamrock Drive in Venice. And those tours are on the first Thursday of every month at 9 a.m. Again, if you look at our Eventbrite, the tours are advertised there. You can sign up there and look for upcoming tours. But it's a great way to meet with these very knowledgeable people that are very passionate about flora-friendly landscaping and making sure people are successful with their landscape. So they're a tremendous resource. And that's it. All right, everyone. Really appreciate you hanging on. I hope this was helpful for you, and look forward to seeing you at our future classes.